Child of God is that we're allowed to come before God's throne of grace and speak to Him. We can come with boldness. We can come right to Him and know that He is there, not because of who we are, but because of who His Son is. Today we're going to begin teaching on the second chapter, the second part of your book that you're doing, your Tenacious Discipleship. I hope you finished the first 5 days and now you're moving to the second part. And it's about prayer, spiritual conversations. Spiritual conversations. It was a very difficult day that Jesus spent when He was with His disciples. They had prepared the place for the Passover, and as they were celebrating the Passover meal, there were several key moments in what was going on. First of all, he put on a towel, he knelt down, and he washed their feet. And that was a powerful lesson. Jesus, the Son of God, kneeling down, washing the feet, serving. And He said, just as I've served you, so you ought to serve one another. From there, He took what we know as the Lord's Supper, the pictures that are drawn about the Last Supper. But the important part there was that He broke the bread and He said, this is my body that's broken for you. And this wine represents my blood that I shed for you. And it was a very emotional. He had told them time and time and time again that they were going to come to Jerusalem, that He was going to be turned over to the religious leaders, that He was going to be killed. They told them that, and yet it still didn't sink in. But yet the moment was getting more and more tense. He could feel it. He knew what was coming. They still didn't see it, but He felt it. And so He said, now let's go out. So it says they left the upper room and they went to the garden. The Garden of Gethsemane, one where they had been to many times before. And it tells us in Matthew chapter 26 the following. It says, then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and He said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and He became anguished and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He went on a little farther and bowed with His face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Then He returned to the disciples, and He found them asleep. And He said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Why couldn't the disciples spend 1 hour just with Jesus in prayer? Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to pray for an hour? Have you ever said, I'm going to pray for an hour? Just set it down. I'm going to pray. I remember, I forget what was going on. I was somewhere and they said, okay, we're all going to pray for an hour. And I said, okay. So I knelt down to pray. And you kneel and you begin praying. And you're praying for this and you're praying for that. And you pray for someone and you pray for someone else. And then you your mind is, you're kind of running out of things. And all of a sudden I say, okay, the hour's about to be up, surely. And I open my eyes and look at my watch, 15 minutes. That ever happened to you? Why is it that they couldn't pray? Now, understand, they had the best teacher and lessons on prayer that anybody could get. Now, mind you, Marcel's good, okay? Marcel's very good, and his lesson on prayer is extremely good. but it's still not Jesus. They had the best teacher. They not only had the best teacher, they had the best example of prayer. They saw Jesus get apart and spend time with his Father in prayer. In fact, his example was so good, they said to him, Jesus, teach us how to pray, just like John has taught his disciple. Teach us. And he did. They saw the most amazing results of prayer that anyone could have seen. I mean, they were amazed. That just go through and underline every time they or someone else around them were just amazed at the things that were happening around the life of Jesus. And yet, they couldn't stay awake and pray for 1 hour with him. Fast forward to the book of Acts. When you get to the book of Acts, listen to this that Mark Moore wrote. He said, the book of Acts is in many ways a blueprint of how to do church. Prayer is an excellent example. Prayer is mentioned in one form or another 10 times in Matthew, 12 times in Mark, and 5 times in John. But Luke mentions it 19 times in his gospel and 32 times in Acts. What happened? Well, just in the first 5 chapters of the book of Acts, you see that first of all, they prayed about their questions and their concerns. They had Jesus right there, and they had a concern, they had a question, so they just went right to him and just asked him. But then he left. Then he ascended into heaven. But the chapter continues, and when they had a decision come up, they prayed about their decisions. Now notice, they didn't decide and then ask God to bless their decision. That's the way we usually do it. We decide and then say, God, bless what I'm going to do. No, they ask God, what do you want me to do? And we want to do what you want to do more than we want to do what we want to do. So what do you want us to do? They prayed about their decisions. They prayed about their trials and their difficulties. When people attacked them, when things didn't go their way, the first thing they did was went to God in prayer. They prayed about it. They prayed for boldness. When things got tough, when this situation was difficult, they knew they needed strength that was beyond themselves, and they prayed for boldness. And by the time they got to chapter 6, they prioritized prayer and the teaching of the Word above every other aspect of ministry. They said, listen, yes, we understand that there's a lot of needs. Yes, we understand that there's a lot of people. Yes, we understand all these things. And for that reason, we're going to ask you to pick some people, some godly men, to take care of these areas. But we must focus on 2 things: praying and teaching the Word. Praying and teaching the Word. That was a priority. What had happened between the we can't stay awake for 1 hour to now, when, as it tells us, they prayed and the whole room shook? What happened? What changed? Well, in my humble opinion, and this is opinion, this is not a verse, this is my opinion, okay? But you can write it down anyway. Jesus was now gone. But in prayer, they felt the closeness of the relationship they had had with him. See, at one point, Jesus was right there. When they wanted to know something, they just went to him. You and I don't understand that. But he was just right there. That's why it says at the beginning of chapter 1, they had a question. They go to Jesus and ask him. And then the next verse, whoop, he's taken up into heaven. He's gone. Now, we look at each other and go, who are we going to talk to? And they said, we're going to keep talking to him. and they just prayed. I think they spent more time in prayer because they felt that closeness. Have you ever been there? Have you ever just had the time and you're praying, you're focused, you've got everything else out of the way, and it's just you and the Lord, and you go, wow, this is different than any other place around. Second thing, I think they finally got it. They finally understood what Jesus said. Without me, you can do nothing. Without me, you can do nothing. Not something. Not a little bit, but not a lot. He didn't say you can't do everything. He said, without me, you can do nothing. So when faced with life and faced with things that had to be done, now, if they were going to face these things, they had to make a priority. They had to pray more. Why do so many of us struggle with a consistent and growing prayer life? I won't say everyone, but I would dare say, if we were honest, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because it would be embarrassing, but I think the great majority of us would have to admit we struggle with a consistent prayer life, a growing prayer life, a prayer life that we truly felt this was the greatest use of time that I have. Why? Let me give you 4 things and see if this won't not only help us understand why, but maybe help us overcome it. The first thing is this: we don't make the time to grow and develop the relationship. To grow and develop the relationship. For most of us, it's difficult to spend time talking with people that we don't really know. Notice I said most of us. I'm sure Elizabeth is back here going, my husband talks to anything, forever and ever. Am I right, Elizabeth? Did I get that right? And there's a few others that I see here. They're going, yeah, I struggle, but they don't. Some of you can talk with anyone about anything. You're just there. We just talk, man. It's like they've known them all their life. And if you're married to one of those, you're going, I don't know this person. Or at least I don't really want to be known that I know this person right now. Because most of us, to talk a long time, we kind of want to know the person. But here's a vicious cycle. If we don't commit the time to get to know them, we'll never really be comfortable with them. It's kind of like you saying, I want to really have an impact and get to know my neighbors. And you say, well, how are we going to do that? Well, you got to make time. You got to set aside time. And here's our excuse. But I don't have time. Let me help you. We all have the same amount of time. We all have the same amount of time. It's just what we choose to do with it. Some of us have prioritized one thing over another. Some of you prioritize a television show over prayer. Some of you prioritize a hobby over prayer. Some of you prioritize time with someone else over time with God in prayer. Would everybody agree that most of us fit in one of those columns? Yes, we do. So we have this vicious cycle. And the only way it's going to change is if we make the time. Let me help you. Guys, if you want the girl, you're going to have to change and prioritize your time. You may have to give up. I know this is hard. I know this is a struggle. You may have to give up a video game if you want the girl. I know it's the ultimate sacrifice, but you might just have to do that. Why? Because it's never going to be what it should be unless you prioritize. And let me help you out here. If you give up the video game to get the girl, and once you got the girl, you neglect the girl for the video game, you're in big trouble. Just letting you know ahead of time. Some of the guys are going, why is he slamming on us? I'm being kind to y'all over on this side. I'm aiming here. Just want you to know that. But they're taking it. But that's just the way it is. It takes time. And it's going to have to take time if you want to build a relationship with God so that you can just spend time talking to Him. It's a spiritual conversation, but it's just time. Second reason, we don't have a plan for our time with Jesus. We don't have a plan. We just kind of say, okay, let's pray, and you just start praying whatever comes to mind. It won't work. Your mind is not that good. And your mind will go all over the place, and all of a sudden you're telling God stuff that He's going, what? And if somebody else is listening to your prayer going, what? Because your brain's just going everywhere. You need a plan. Now, let me give you, it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, it better not be complicated. Here's one I found the other day just Googling prayer plan. It's called the hand. How many of you have a hand? Raise it up. If you have two, go ahead. Very good. You got two. Good. So you got a hand. So it's very simple. You got praise, you got confession, you got thanksgiving, you got intercession, and you got your personal request. There you go. 5 minutes on each of those, and you got a 25-minute time of prayer. That's all it is. You're going, but Russell, why? It's just that simple. Most of the time when you don't have a plan, you know what you do? You go, God, I want, and you go straight to 5. And it's your personal request, and you just don't know. And then it's like, whatever. Just spend some time. You say, I don't know if I can remember that. Then take it and write it on your finger. Don't wash your hands tonight, and tomorrow morning wake up and go, pray. Okay, I got it. Just a very simple thing. Maybe some of you prefer concentric circles, and so you do it this way. And this is not mine, so it's kind of hard to read, but it's got like me, family, church, community, nation, world. That works. You know, you kind of start here, and here's the interesting part. In each one of those, you kind of use the hand. You can do the hand for me, and then you can do the hand for family. And then you can just work and you can put them all together. It doesn't matter which plan you use, but you just have to have a plan. A pastor by the name of Ronnie Floyd wrote an article called A Personal Prayer Plan. And just type that in, Google it, and you'll come up with it. And because it's appeared in several different publications. And he says, here's what your personal prayer plan has to be. Simple, sequential, specific, and spiritual. You can tell an American did that. It all has to match, okay? And so you've got it. Simple, sequential, specific, and spiritual. And if you have a plan, it's going to go much better. Back to the dating, guys. You better have a plan, because you are not that interesting without a plan, okay? You got that? Here we go. You're going, is this about prayer or something? I'm just trying to help, trying to cover all the bases here. have a plan. Third, we're disappointed or upset with God. That's why we don't have time with Him. Have you noticed when you're upset with someone, you don't really want to be around them? Have you noticed when you're upset with them, we kind of make it short, we kind of make it, cut to the chase, and, we do what has to be done, but we move on. Why? Because we're disappointed or we're upset with the person. Should I go back to dating? If she's short with you, you did something. I don't know what it is. Some of us men have never figured out what we did. Just say, I'm sorry, and go on, okay? Anyway. So, we're disappointed. We're upset with God. Here's the most common complaints. God didn't do. God didn't answer. God didn't give me. We start off and we're upset with God because of something that we perceive that God should have done, but He didn't do it. We thought He would open the waters. We thought He would move the mountain, and He didn't do it. And we'll come to church and sing, I will trust in you, but we really just get ticked. And so we don't spend time with Him. We don't pray with Him. We don't talk to Him. Why? Because God didn't do. Or maybe it's because God allowed something. God allowed illness to come our way. God allowed death. God allowed some tragedy in our life or in the life of someone around it. And because God didn't step in and stop it, we're upset with Him. We're disappointed in Him. We're thinking He should have done this and He didn't do it. I need you to write this down, and I need you to really think about it. Our understanding of the realities of this life are limited at best. Limited at best. Last year I spent about a month and a half going through the book of Job. Just going through it, chapter by chapter. It's easy to do the first 2 chapters and do the last couple chapters and kind of skip all the part in the middle. But the story of Job is very simple. Job is a good man doing what's right, and good people get good things. So, Act 1. The devil and God are talking, and the devil is accusing all kind of people to God and said, but have you looked at my servant Job? And the devil said, well, you've given him everything anybody could want. Take it away and see what happens. He said, okay, go ahead and take it away. Just don't touch him. And in one day, he had a really bad day. He lost it all. A few days later, the same encounter between God and Satan. And he says, yeah, but what about Job? See, he didn't curse me. He says, yeah, but he still got his health. Wait till you do that. Wait till you get him there. See what happens. And so God said, okay, you can affect his health, just you can't kill him. And he said, so he did, and one day that he thought was bad with everything around him, now all that bad stuff happened to him. And he's covered in boils. He's covered in pain. It's just horrible. The only thing Satan left him was his wife. And I say Satan left him because you got to read the story, okay? That's the only thing he left. And there it is. There's the story. From there to chapter 38, his friends are coming by and say, you did something. I mean, no one could have it this bad of stuff happen. You've done something. We don't see it, but you did it. You know you did it. And he goes, no, I didn't. And when he was taking a break from trying to answer them, he's saying to God, God, I didn't do anything. Why are you doing this to me? And as the book goes on, I mean, it's louder and louder. And Job, even though he didn't do it, in searching for the why, he lost his way. And now he is literally just, God, who do you think you are? And all of a sudden in chapter 38, God stops the conversation. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. When God says brace yourself, when God says, who are you to question me? I mean, stop and think for just a second. Job must have gone, oh crud, I went too far. You know why? Because he'd gone too far. He accused God of not being fair. He accused God of not being good. He accused God of stuff that you and I accuse God of all the time, and then wonder why we don't want to spend time with Him. Brace yourself. Brace yourself. Our disappointments with God expose the limitations of our knowledge and understanding with who God really is. So often I want to tell people, and I want to have a conversation with them, and I hear their complaints, and I hear the stuff that they say, and I want to shake them, and I want to say, listen, you don't even know God. You may spell it, but you do not know Him. And by the end of the book, Job says, I thought I knew you. I had heard about you. Now I really get to know you. Do you really want God to shake your life up so bad that you have to brace yourself for what's coming next? Why not instead just go spend some time with Him and say, Lord, I want to get to know you. Tell me something about you in your word. Give me something that I can learn about. I want to know you. God says you will seek me and you will find me if you seek me with all of your heart. Please understand, God is not a cosmic vending machine. You don't get to put a few coins in the offering plate, punch in a couple of requests, and bang, it comes out just because you did that. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. In Matthew, Jesus was talking, and He said, you parents, if your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask Him? The other day in Pura Vida, I was playing for them the story of Zachary Smith, our missionary's son, who who died at age 30-something, 3, 4, something like that. And I'm listening to his testimony again, and he said this. He quoted this verse in Matthew 7, and he said, "And God is a good God, so anything He gives me, including this cancer, is a good gift, because He is a good, good Father." You feel you've been shortchanged? You feel that God hasn't been fair? You don't know God. Stop. Get to know Him. Why? He is a good, good Father. I want to take a break. I want you to listen to this song, read the words, and apply them to your situation. I know many of you have heard that song. I first heard it this week. You go, how could you not hear it on the Christian radio? I don't listen to Christian radio. That's a whole different conversation. You know where I heard this? At my pastor friend's wife's funeral this week. Made a lot of sense there. Let me ask you something. Are there a lot of songs you like, you just don't live? A lot of songs you enjoy, you just don't believe? Every time you hear a good, solid, biblical song, do you realize you're responsible to live it? You go, I may cut off the radio. Maybe that's why I don't. Let me give you the fourth thing. We still don't believe what Jesus said. Without me, you can do nothing. See, you and I we still somehow believe that, but we can. We can. And God says, you got to realize, no, you can't. Why? Because self-sufficiency is the mortal enemy of God dependency. Self-sufficiency is the mortal enemy of God dependency. Whether it's wisdom, money, or strength, each of them are simply idols if we allow them to take us away from being fully dependent on God. Jesus said, people who trust in their money, they never get as close to God as they should be. People that trust in their own wisdom, people that trust in their own strength, it says, don't do that. Trust in me. And so often our trials serve to point out to us what we turn to instead of turning to God. He says, I'm putting you through this fire. What did you turn to? Well, I turned to the bottle. Well, that was your idol. I turned to food. Then that's your idol. I turned to shopping. Well, that's your idol. I turned to anything you turn to before God is your idol. And the last little verse in 1 John, little children, stay away from idols. Stay away from idols. Prayer is at the core of abiding in Christ. You can't abide with someone that you don't know. You can't know someone you don't talk to. You can't stay connected to Jesus if you don't spend time in prayer with Him each and every day. But here's the reality. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And sometimes we think that little phrase kind of excuses us then. Well, you know, I'm only human. I know. That's why we're talking. We're all human. We're all human. That's not an excuse. Jesus came to die for humans. Jesus wants to have a relationship with humans. The Bible was written to humans, and it said, pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. I want to ask you to do me a favor. Bow your heads. Just put the bulletin to one side. Not going to need it anymore. Would you like this next week to be a better week in prayer than last week? So what's going to have to change? What are you going to have to do different? Would you go to the Lord right now? And maybe it's the time thing. And say, Lord, point out to me where I can make the time to spend it with you. Maybe it's the plan thing. Pick this plan. Get online. There's a ton of them out there. Get a plan. If you're upset or disappointed with God, then right now, go to Him. Tell Him these things. He can handle it. But don't stay mad. It's not doing you any good. And it's not hurting Him at all. Stop. Talk to Him right now. Quit depending on what you think you can do. I'm going to ask them to play that video again. The altar is open if you want to come and pray. But just determine in your heart, this coming week, I want it to be a better week in prayer with Jesus. The altar is open. Lord, I pray that each of us can truly say that, no matter what. Lord, and it's not because things are always going great. Lord, there are people hurting here this morning. There's tragedy that struck at a personal level and a family level. And Lord, it struck at a national level. Lord, there's all kind of stuff going on in our world. And Lord, you haven't forgotten. You're not blind. You know what's happening. You haven't lost control at any level. Lord, I pray that we would spend time with you so that we can make sense of all the other stuff that's going on around us. Lord, I thank you that you've opened the way for us to have these spiritual conversations. Lord, another lesson won't do it. We have to just take the time. And I pray that this week may be a better week for each of us in our spiritual conversations with you than last week was. Well, thank you for it all in your precious name. Amen.